The night air was heavy with the sound of engines as a row of bikes pulled into the parking lot of a small roadside diner. Inside, the quiet hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of silverware on plates, the kind of peace that comes from a place where people stop to rest, not to cause trouble. At the counter sat a woman, simple in her appearance, but with a dignity that didn't need dressing up. She was the kind of person who spoke softly, who carried herself humbly, and who preferred not to draw attention. She had been waiting for her husband to return from the bathroom when the doors swung open and the bikers walked in, loud and reckless, bringing with them a tension that seemed to suffocate the air. One of them, a tall man with tattoos crawling down his arms, spotted her. His lips curled into a grin that carried no kindness. He swaggered over, his boots hitting the floor with an arrogant rhythm. Leaning down too close, he smirked and said, "Come here, sexy girl." Before she could even move away, his hand snapped against her cheek with a loud slap that turned every head in the diner. The shock froze her in place, her eyes filling with tears not from the sting, but from the humiliation. She had done nothing. She had only wanted a quiet evening with her husband. But before she could speak, before she could even take a breath, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. A chair scraped back, steady footsteps echoed across the floor, and the room grew so silent that the sound of those boots carried like thunder. Her husband had returned, a man not flashy, not loud, but with a presence that filled every corner of the room. He was no stranger to danger, no stranger to men like these, and the sight of his wife's reddened cheek told him all he needed to know. The biker turned, ready to laugh it off, but he didn't even have time to blink. A hand, faster than his drunken reflexes, gripped his wrist and twisted it with such force that he dropped to his knees, the sound of bones straining cutting through the silence. The man's smirk was gone, replaced with a howl of pain. The others jumped up from their table, ready to join the fight, but they didn't realize who they were dealing with. Years of discipline, training, and experience were written in every precise movement of the husband's body. He wasn't just defending his wife, he was unleashing a storm no one in that diner would ever forget. The second biker lunged, swinging a heavy fist meant to break bone, but it never landed. A counterpunch, swift and brutal, collapsed him to the floor, his body limp before he hit the tiles. Another came from behind, thinking he could catch him off guard, but the husband moved like he had eyes in the back of his head. He pivoted, elbow driving into the man's gut, then followed with a strike so sharp that the biker doubled over, gasping for air. 1 second, they had been standing tall, drunk on their own power. The next, they were sprawled across the ground, groaning, broken, humiliated. The leader, still clutching his twisted arm, tried to bark out an order, but the words died in his throat when the husband leaned down, his voice low, calm, but filled with steel. "You don't touch her, ever again." The way he said it wasn't just a warning. It was a promise, one that every man in that room understood could be carried out without hesitation. The simple woman, still shaken, looked at her husband, her heart pounding with both fear and gratitude. She had always known he was strong, but seeing him like this reminded her of something deeper, why she had fallen for him in the first place. He wasn't just a protector in moments of violence. He was the kind of man who stood up for what was right, who carried the weight of loyalty, honor, and love like a shield. The bikers, beaten and bruised, scrambled to gather themselves, dragging each other toward the door. Their arrogance had dissolved, replaced with shame and the sting of defeat. No one in the diner pitied them. In fact, the other patrons, who had watched in stunned silence, now looked at the couple with awe. The man returned to his wife's side, his hand gently brushing against her cheek, his eyes softening as he checked the mark left behind. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice carrying none of the violence it had a moment ago, only tenderness. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. He sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the stares, from the world. The diner slowly returned to its rhythm, though the story of what had just happened would ripple through the town long after. That night, as they drove home, the woman sat quietly, replaying the moment over in her mind. She thought about how quickly cruelty can strike, how swiftly dignity can be stolen. But she also thought about how love, real love, can restore it in an instant. Her husband hadn't just fought for her, he had reminded her of her worth, of the fact that no one, not even a gang of bikers, could take that away. And somewhere on the road behind them, those bikers would ride in silence, each of them carrying not only their bruises, but also a lesson burned deep into memory. A lesson that some men may look simple, some women may look defenseless, but behind love and loyalty lies a strength no gang, no arrogance, no cruelty could ever stand against. The world often forgets that true power doesn't come from fear or intimidation. It comes from protecting what matters most. And on that night, in a small roadside diner, everyone who witnessed it learned that the hard way. The night was quiet, and the neon sign of a small roadside diner buzzed faintly against the dark sky, casting a glow that seemed to promise warmth and peace to travelers. Inside, the air carried the scent of coffee and fried food, mixed with the hum of low conversation, a place where tired souls could rest without fear. At the counter sat a woman, modestly dressed, her demeanor simple but graceful, the kind of presence that asked for no attention but carried its own quiet dignity. She waited for her husband, who had stepped away for a moment, and her thoughts drifted to how ordinary the evening had seemed just minutes before. But the calm broke when the rumble of motorcycles filled the lot outside, and in moments the door swung open, bringing with it a gang of bikers whose laughter and heavy boots seemed to swallow the room whole. They walked in like they owned the place, filling every corner with arrogance, and one of them, tall and tattooed with a smirk that carried no warmth, laid eyes on her. His gaze was not the gaze of a gentleman, but of a man who mistook silence for weakness. He sauntered over, leaning too close, his words dripping with disrespect as he sneered, "Come here, sexy girl." Before she could move away, his hand came across her face with a slap that echoed through the diner, sharp and cruel. Gasps broke out around the room, forks froze in midair, and time seemed to pause. Her cheeks stung, but more than pain was the flood of humiliation, the sudden heat of shame for something she had done nothing to deserve. Her eyes watered, her breath caught, and in that moment she felt small, surrounded, exposed. But 1 second later, everything changed. A chair scraped back with deliberate force, footsteps cut across the floor, and a presence stronger than the air itself filled the diner. Her husband had returned. He was not a man who spoke loudly, not one who sought to prove himself with theatrics. But in that moment, every person in the room could sense the storm inside him. He saw his wife's reddened cheek, her trembling hands, and without a word he knew everything that had happened. He did not rush, he did not yell, but the weight in his steady steps was heavier than the roar of any motorcycle. The biker, who had struck her, turned to laugh, expecting amusement from his companions, but laughter never came. In the blink of an eye, the husband's hand gripped the man's wrist with a precision that came from years of experience, twisting it so hard and fast that the biker dropped to his knees with a scream of pain. The sound of bones straining echoed louder than his arrogant words had moments ago. His smirk vanished, replaced with panic and agony, and the diner held its breath as the room shifted in his favor. The other bikers jumped from their seats, fueled by loyalty and pride, but they had no idea who they were about to face. The second man lunged forward with a heavy punch, but the husband's reflexes were faster. His counter-strike landed squarely, collapsing the man to the ground, unconscious before his body hit the floor. Another came from behind, hoping to catch him off guard, but he turned with the precision of a soldier, his elbow crushing into the man's stomach, forcing the air from his lungs before a follow-up strike sent him to his knees. Chaos erupted in seconds, but it was not the chaos the bikers had expected. Their numbers gave them no advantage, their size gave them no strength. Against him, they were helpless, clumsy, broken. One by one, they fell, the sound of bodies hitting the floor breaking the silence that had once hung in the diner. The leader, his wrist twisted in agony, tried to bark out orders, but no sound came that could rally his men. Instead, he found himself staring into the eyes of a man whose calm was far more terrifying than rage. The husband leaned in close, his voice low, steady, and sharp as steel. "You don't touch her, ever again." The words were not a threat. They were a vow, a promise that every man in the room believed, because they had seen the proof in the way he moved, the way he fought, the way he stood unshaken while others lay groaning at his feet. The simple woman, still trembling, looked at him with a mix of awe and relief. She had always known he was strong, but in that moment she saw not just strength, but the depth of love that fueled it. He was not just fighting bikers, he was fighting for her dignity, her safety, her honor. He returned to her side, his hands gentle as he brushed her cheek, the tenderness in his eyes washing away the violence of the moment. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, and the calm in his voice brought her back from the edge of fear. She nodded, though her heart still raced, and he pulled her into the shelter of his arms, reminding her that she was never alone, never unprotected. Around them, the diner began to stir again, whispers breaking out as people took in what they had witnessed. No one pitied the bikers as they scrambled to their feet, bruised and beaten, dragging each other out the door. They came in loud and left in silence, their arrogance stripped away, replaced by the shame of defeat. As the engines roared back to life and faded into the distance, the story was already etching itself into the memory of everyone who had been there. That night, as the couple drove away from the diner, the woman sat quietly, her cheek still warm from the slap, but her heart warmer from the love that followed. She thought about how quickly cruelty can strike, how swiftly dignity can be stolen, but also how love can restore it in the blink of an eye. Her husband hadn't just defended her, he had reminded her of her worth, a worth no stranger could take from her. Behind them, the bikers rode into the night, carrying their bruises and a lesson they would not forget. They had learned that some women may look simple, some men may look ordinary, but love and loyalty can unleash a strength no gang, no arrogance, no violence can ever overcome. And in that small roadside diner, under the hum of neon lights, everyone present had witnessed something greater than a fight. They had seen the true power of a man's love for his wife, a power that needed no words, no weapons, only the courage to stand and the will to protect what mattered most. That was the night arrogance hit the ground hard and dignity stood tall.